Hello, everyone. I think we are online. Welcome to our webinar about why, what, and how to do the graduate school applications. I am an assistant professor at CMU Robotics Institute. This is my 4th year. I'm Zeynep Temel. I will ask my friends here to introduce themselves briefly. Brady, do you want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Brady Moon. I'm a 4th year PhD student in the Air Lab, and my research is focused on path planning mainly.
I have Bart on my screen next.
Yeah, I'm Bart Duitserhoff. I'm a 2nd year PhD student in the Air Lab, and I work on 3D perception. So Brady and I are in the same lab. Yeah.
And then we have Sassy.
I am Ceci Morales. I am a MD PhD student, and I am in my 3rd year of my PhD, and I am working in the Aten lab in medical robotics in surgery robots.
Great. So before we start, I would like to tell you that you can actually send us questions, and we will be talking for 30 minutes, and after that we will try to answer as many questions as we can. And we would like to tell that this is a perspective from us, and the information here might not apply to other schools that you are planning to apply, or not other departments or programs that you are planning to apply. So keep in mind that this is basically only our perspective. Okay, let's go. So this is our agenda today. I'll briefly talk about why should you be interested in grad school, or how to decide about it. And then we will talk about the application process. And then we will tell you a little bit about how our day goes. So what it is like to be in the grad school. And then we will try to answer your questions. Again, everything is our own opinion. And this doesn't mean that that we are giving answers to all of your questions about all of the places. Cool. So why go to grad school? I guess you're considering going to grad school if you are here. So let's talk about it. So once you finish college, you can continue your education in grad school. And there are basically 2 ways to do that. You can pursue a master's degree, or you can pursue a PhD degree. So we have at CMU in Robotics Institute 2 types of master's degree, and there are many different programs. One type of master's degree is like professional master's degree. So this is basically if you want additional training, if you want to get specialized in a particular subject, if you want to take classes focusing on particular domain. This is basically towards that interest. And then we have the research master's degree. And this is more like if you want to build more research credentials, if you are looking for a research-based industry job, or if you are interested in continuing for PhD. So the master's studies are usually self-funded, but sometimes you can find funding through teaching assistantships or research assistantships or other fellowships on campus. They are usually 2 years long, and there are most of the time there are more available spots in the master's program than PhD program. Also, we have more master's program than PhD program. We have 3 master's program at RI Robotics Institute and 1 PhD program. Okay, so I think we can continue with the PhD in the next slide. So PhD is more focused. So if you're applying for a PhD, probably you already know your interest and you know what you want to work on in terms of research. What we are doing is we are trying to create new knowledge rather than focusing on the new coursework. There are many opportunities to teach and mentor students through teaching assistantships, teaching fellowships. And this is a more academic setup than an industrial setup. However, saying that, I'm not saying that there is no path towards industry after PhD. Actually, most of our graduates, some of our graduates also consider industry positions after doing PhD. The period is usually 5 to 6 years, although it depends on your background and on your topic. And typically includes tuition waiver and stipend. So you actually get paid during PhD. I think this covers all. Okay, so let's have a look at how the PhD program works. And this is an example. When you first arrive here, for the first 2 years, you are expected to do coursework and research. And this coursework is more specialized towards your research. There are core areas and elective areas, and core areas are focusing on the program that you pick. So if you are picking a robotics program, it is very likely that you will get machine learning, kinematics, dynamics control, for example, those kind of classes as core courses, and then you are expected to have elective courses. And then starting from year 3, you will have qualifiers. So in RI, we have multiple qualifiers. One of them is writing qualifier, which basically shows that you have writing skills and you can present your research results in writing. The other one is speaking qualifier. Again, you can present your research through presentations. And then we have research qualifier that basically tells that you are qualified to do research and you ask good research questions, and then you know how to answer them, you know the path to answer them. And we also require teaching assistantships for 2 courses here. And the 3rd year usually is the time to finish all these qualifiers. Most of our students propose their thesis topic in their 4th year. And this is actually a document that you write and then followed with a presentation. And then at the end of the year 5 or 6, there is a dissertation and defense. Of course, during all this time, we expect you to spend some part of your time doing research. So coursework and qualifiers will not take all of your time. You will still have time to do research. And these mileages can vary. So this is like a typical or like an example overview, but you might actually finish your coursework later. You might do your qualifiers earlier. Some students can actually propose like a year early or a year late, depending on where they are in their PhD program. Okay. So how do you decide if you want to go to PhD or master's, or what is next step for you after the college? So the first question I encourage you to ask is if you enjoy the academic environment, if you enjoy being in the university environment. And if the answer is no, I actually think that you should maybe go for a job and then think about the grad school later, and then try that out. Personally, this is where I decided to actually go for grad school after my experience in some internships. And if you actually enjoy the academic environment, but you are not decided if you want to do like research, or if you want to continue with industry or master's or PhD, you can maybe follow this flow chart. So if you want to focus on improving your industry skills, the professional master's program might be a good choice for you, especially if you can afford a self-funded program. But if you want to build your research skills and if you want to explore that field, you can consider either research-based master's or PhD programs for you. PhD programs require a longer commitment because they take longer than master's program. So that might be another decision factor. If you're not sure about like spending 6 years in a research lab doing research, maybe you can start with master's and then still you can turn into a PhD, so you can apply to PhD programs later. So I think this is a very helpful flow chart, and probably most of us actually followed this questions without knowing this when we decide to go to grad school. Okay. So I will pass this to Brady to continue for how to apply to grad schools.
All right, thank you. So the next step we're going to go through is each of the portions of your application. So the four big pieces are going to be your CV, your statement of purpose, letter of recommendations, and then test scores and transcripts. So I'll be first going into the details of a CV. So first, what is a CV? The main focus of it is to concisely convey the relevant skills and experiences. So you're going to have other portions of your application where you get to really talk about yourself and your passions. And the CV is a place where it's really just condensed into one document. So some of the things that you should definitely include in your CV. So number one is going to be your research experience. So these could be undergrad research. This could be big projects or even maybe some smaller ones. But what you really want to show here is that you've done this before, you know what you're getting into, and that you have the necessary skills to be able to do some research on your own. So things you'd want to include as far as specifics are publications for sure. It's a very measurable metric of research. Any abstracts, posters, or other presentations that you've done. Some other things that are really good to include are even just internships in industry. Even though this isn't necessarily research focused, it does show that you have technical expertise that translates into being able to actually conduct research and accomplish your research tasks. You can also include any long-term projects, big things that you're able to accomplish. This could also include maybe like competition teams that you were on where you built a system and competed together as a team. Some other things to include would be fellowships. And so these could be fellowships that you got in your undergrad, or fellowships that are going to apply to graduate school, and also any awards that you've received. Some other things that are good are the academic service that you've done, any volunteering, mentoring, TAing. All these things show kind of who you are, what matters to you, and also it shows that you can contribute as a graduate student in more ways than just the research. And it shows that you can be a good fit in the university environment. Some things that you maybe don't want to include, and this is really up to you and you have to decide where is the line. But some things may be just like semester long or shorter projects. Although there are maybe some really cool projects that you think really exemplify research or tenacity or creativity that you really want to show, that's up to you. But most of the time, if these are small things like just a class project that you did just as part of your grade, it's probably not going to meet the level of what should be included in a CV. Some other things to probably not include are personal information such as citizenship, marital status, age, photo, all that those personal details probably shouldn't include there and shouldn't be factored in as part of an admissions decision anyway. Some general tips for CVs, and a lot of these also apply to resume that you may have heard before as you've probably prepared resumes. But what makes a CV different? So one is it's going to be typically longer and more detailed than a resume. You get a little bit more space to include some more things or go into more detail than you would in a resume. You'll want to make sure that your formatting is very clear and concise and consistent. Really, what I would recommend is just kind of going online and Googling around and finding some that really speak to you, that you really like, and then just use that as a template. And you can even find templates online that people are totally fine with you using and expounding upon. Since this is a PDF and it's not going to be printed out probably ever, you can add links, which is really cool. So you could add links to the presentations that you've done, the papers, talks, maybe project websites, even maybe news articles about the work that you've done. You can feel free to add those in there. It makes it really easy for someone as they're perusing through your CV as part of the admissions committee to just click on those and explore and be able to get a good feel for who you are. So CVs, there is technically no page limit, but obviously if you go too big, no one's going to read it. And the downside with being too big is it doesn't allow you to really guide the reviewer to the really good stuff about you. So we recommend probably keeping it 2 to 3 pages, just so then the viewer can get through everything and be able to see really who you are. And then in general, you've probably heard this before, but as you're writing out the details in bulleted points, to use like action and result-oriented points. So you can use like an action verb such as like directed, instructed, guided, created, those types of things, and then talk about the task that you did, and then talk about a measurable result. So you could say something like, it was improved by 25%, or was able to accomplish X number more tasks, or something that's actually measurable and not just fluffy and ethereal and doesn't really get to the point of what you actually accomplished. And we have other links on this slide that when you go to the slides later, you can go to, and they have a lot of other details for this and really good step-by-step examples.
Hey, Brady, I think that's it for your first part. Again, my name is Bart, and I'll highlight a few important pieces of the statement of purpose. So in addition to the CV, you typically also submit a statement of purpose for your grad school application. And while it varies a lot between different people, like because it's kind of a way in which you try to describe your own personal story, we do have some guidelines of things that we really want to see in a statement of purpose. So there's 3 things we put down on this slide. The first is what problems are you interested in exploring and why are they important to you? So, especially for research-focused problems, this is really useful to identify your research area and motivation. So why do you want to work on this area? Why do you think it's interesting and important? And then the next step is to explain why you're qualified to tackle these kind of problems. So in step 1, or the first aspect, you would explain like why you're really motivated to work on this kind of problem. But after that, you would also want to talk about why you would be qualified to work on these kind of problems and describe your prior experience. So we do see, people from all sorts of different backgrounds coming into the Robotics Institute, but it is, good to try to explain in a sense of what kind of skills you expect to be required for the program you're applying to and the specific research, and try to connect that to what you've done before and why, convince the reviewer that you will succeed in the program that you're applying for. And that brings me to the third point. So, there's so many different programs out there these days, not just in robotics, but in CS and adjacent fields. So it's really important to try to make a connection between our department and your personal experience and interests. So why specifically the Robotics Institute? What faculty that you want to work with? Most SOPs that I've seen have like a section where they specifically talk about this specific faculty that they would be really interested in working with, and really show us how your connection with the department is a really good fit. So there's some tips here. Great SOP includes how have your experience shaped you and what you aspire to do. So I talked a bit before about how you're specifically motivated for this field of research. It's really great if you can sort of link this to some of your previous experience and why you're interested in this specific field. What is sort of your vision on research? What are your short and longer term goals? So this could be, I really want to be a researcher, or I want to get into industry for a more industry focused program, and to have a bit of vision there also generally helps. And then the last point is, how do you plan to get back to the community? And here with this, you can really score points in a sense. So using the skills that you have or that you would acquire in one of our programs, how would you help to give back to the community and empower other people? So yeah, another important piece is not just repeat your CV, so the reviewer would see your CV, but your SOP is really the chance to talk about things that you cannot really talk about in your CV, and to give some more context of your personal experience and motivation, instead of just sort of an itemized list of what you've done before. So here's some useful resources. Please a reminder that these slides are online on the website for this webinar, so you can find the links on the website of this webinar. Now I'll talk more about letters of recommendation. So letter of recommendation is an external person that submits a letter for you and sort of tells the reviewer about their experience with working with you. it could be different kind of people. It could be research advisor, internship mentors, or professors that you trade with. It is generally recommended to have, out of the 3 recommenders that CMU asks for, to have at least 2 of them be within an academic relationship. And I would say the closer they have been to you and the more precise they can describe your performance, the better. So if you've worked with someone on research, of course, that's a really strong fit. And sort of depending on your program, you may also want to include an internship mentor. So especially for the more research-focused problems like the MRSD that we offer here at CMU, there's an expectation of an internship or some sort of industry person, as far as I know. So as I said before, like somewhat less strong letters come from professors who will only know you from class, so you'll have a far less deep understanding of what you're like to work with. So you know, if a professor really can precisely describe what it is like to work with you, then that's a much better recommendation letter. So how to help your recommendation letters. So as I said before, it's important to choose the people well and maybe talk to them about how well they think they can write a recommendation letter for you. It's also definitely recommended to reach out as soon as possible. I know that the deadline for this year is soon, but especially professors are typically very busy, so it's good to reach out early so they can take some time to write your recommendation letters. So one other thing that I've previously seen from recommendation letters is that they add supporting materials, or like you could send supporting materials to your recommender, but sometimes they also add supporting material themselves. So like, we worked on this paper together, here's a summary of the work we did together, like that kind of thing. And sometimes your SLP, if you already have a draft, is also useful for them to sort of see what your motivation is on a high level. Okay, so here I'll hand it to Sissy that will talk about fellowships.
Hi, so as Zeynep mentioned earlier, the master's is self-funded, and if you cannot afford to pay that on your own accord, you can apply for fellowships. And there's a lot of fellowships, and there's a lot of options, especially if you're a US citizen. There's a couple, and there's different for internationals, and there's also others that do not have citizenship requirements. So it is like recommended to apply, and how they work is that you write some research that you're proposing to do, and write how you're gonna do it, what is the impact, and tailor it accordingly to what the fellowship is looking for. And if you're a PhD student, well, the PhD funds you. You could also apply for fellowships. And what this allows you is that it gives you more flexibility with your research and what you want to do, because if you join with an advisor, then you might be a little bit more bound to the projects that they have. But if you have a fellowship, you might have a little bit more flexibility in telling your advisor what type of research you want to do. So yeah, take a look into them. And so how do you find a program? There's a lot of different programs at CMU. So you should like look into all of the professors and see if there's any research that is of good fit for you. And check if like the professors are actually taking students. And you should think about like reading all of their descriptions, maybe a couple of the papers that they've published. And then you should mention them in the statement of purpose, as Bart just mentioned. And yeah, like in terms of like the master's program, think about what are you trying to look into, and then also in the School of Computer Science, you shouldn't just think of like the Robotics Institute as your only option. You could also apply to the Machine Learning department, and like LTI, the Language Technology Institute, and all of those programs. You can have like actually a PhD advisor from any school inside the School of Computer Science. So basically, if you are like a Language Technology Institute student, you can actually have an advisor in the Robotics Institute. So just so that like you don't feel limited, the only changes it's like the requirements of the programs. But yeah, just like take a look at what each program entails, and decide like that. Can go to the next slide, please. So there's help in terms of like when you're trying to apply. This is like very daunting. We don't know, like you might be your first time applying and you might not know exactly how to do. Well, there's a lot of experienced students that are willing to help you. So CMU has this program called like the Graduate Application Support Program, where we can help you and give you feedback on your application. So yeah, just take a look at this website and definitely take advantage of all the support that people are trying to give you. And yeah, so like every time you apply for the like for a PhD or a master's, there's like a fee associated with it. But if you're in this list, you can get a fee waiver. And yeah, so like we don't want the fee to be a deterrent from you to apply. So definitely like if this is like something that is like stopping you, like please like reach out and contact, because we can do everything possible so that you're able to apply. And now we'll hear from Bart about what is grad school like.
Thanks, Sissy. So it might be, you know, of interest to some of you guys how what grad school is like in the US in general. So in some other countries, you might apply for a job or for a specific project, essentially. So a faculty might post, you know, almost like a job posting for a specific project. In the US, what typically happens is that you apply for a program. So at CMU, you apply for a PhD or a master's at the Robotics Institute. And for the PhD program specifically, there will then be a matching process, and you'll find out who is your advisor and what you will work on with them. So this is quite different from some other places around the world. There's even kind of varies between the US. So in some other schools, you get, for instance, matched with your advisor at the time of being admitted. That said, also the funding situation varies. So PhDs are typically funded in the US. So you would get a fully funded position with a stipend and tuition support. But it's not always the case. But it's very, very typical for them to be funded, whereas master's programs are very often not funded. There are some positions where you would be funded. Another difference is that in some countries, you would first have to get a master's and then go to a PhD program. So those are kind of two separate things. But in the US, many times people come straight from undergrad. And that's also why, compared to some other countries, it might take a little longer. So 5 to 6 years is what we typically say here. And there's also the aspect that because the US is so large, your experience in lifestyle and so on will vary a lot. So for instance, in Pittsburgh, we have very different weather from in Los Angeles, but also the city is much different. I personally really enjoy the city of Pittsburgh, but it's a lot different than our cities in the US. So it's worth looking into. We'll talk about a bit more about it later, but it's definitely part of your experience that will be very different depending on what school you go to. And then we'll talk about a day of our life in the life of a grad student at CMU. So this is my day in life. So I bike to campus. Luckily, Pittsburgh has great bike lanes in some of the areas. So this is a picture of, on the left you see the campus of CMU, on the right as well, by the way. And there's bike lanes in many of the streets. So I had a Zoom chat with our collaborators in other countries. Started working on my research. I was trying to generate some synthetic data for some computer vision research we're doing. Then I have food and played pool with friends. So one of the great things about the Robotics Institute is that we have this, what we call a robotics lounge, which is a great place to hang out with friends and discuss what you're working on and how your life has been recently. Then I worked on homework for this class, geometry-based methods in vision, met with my undergrads and went home to cook, work out, and relax. So this is me cooking salmon or baking salmon. Okay, I believe we're at Ceci's day in life now.
Yeah, so my day in the life, I usually wake up at around 6 a.m. And then I work out from 7 to 9 a.m. Then I have some class for med school from 9 to 10. Then I head over to CMU and because I take med school classes at Pitt. Then I head over to CMU and do research. I have lunch and continue to do research. My research is in surgery in robotics. So we have subjects as animals, and usually we do our experiments with pigs. Sometimes these pigs escape and do not want to be done research on. So some of my time is spending running around the med school, trying to chase this pig so that we can do research. And then we do our research. And then I have ultimate frisbee practice. There's a lot of sports clubs at CMU. So that's like really fun. It's a fun way to exercise and also hang out with friends. A lot of the team are my friends. You can see there a picture of us. It was actually this past Friday. It was raining a lot, so we are soaked. And then after 9, I do my homework and I finish all like the research things, especially if I have deadlines. Have dinner, I call my family, and I hang out with Kira, my cat, and then I sleep.
Okay, so I'll go over my typical day. So I actually have 2 kids. So usually my day starts whenever the first one wakes up. And then usually from about 7 to 9:30, I spend time with them, have breakfast, exercise. Usually I get to campus or work around 10 o'clock. A lot of that day is spent doing emails and meetings with project sponsors. About 11 o'clock, maybe I'll get some time to actually do some research that can entail like reading papers, exploring different solutions, writing code, gathering results. Then maybe at like 1, I'd have more meetings with whether it be undergrads I'm working with or master's students or other collaborators. They may have some just research group meetings. And then hopefully I can get a good chunk of time, like 3 to 6:30 of doing again some more research tasks. I try to be home around 6:30 to be with family, have dinner, put kids to bed. And then after 9 o'clock, that allows time for me to do any urgent tasks or do hobby projects and relax and such. Some other great aspects about CMU and grad life is that as you go throughout this program, you have your cohort, you have these friends that you'll meet, and every day that you're going out with them, even like this is an example of a group lunch. I believe this is the cohort just a year before me. And you can see here represented in just this lunch, the different areas of research, and you can see the variety that when you're just out and about with friends, you have so many different people you could potentially collaborate with or learn from or learn different ways of looking at things because there is so much variety in who is here. Another aspect of grad life is getting to go to conferences. Here we see these are just two recent conferences, ICRA and IROS. IROS was in Japan, ICRA was in Philadelphia. And these group pictures are people from the RI. I think in both of these, it's not even everyone from the RI that is there. But you can see there's a substantial amount of students there to go and to learn together, but also have good fun together. So now we do want to also just focus on why CMU. We've talked about some general things with just applying to graduate schools in general, why being a graduate student, what it's like, but then specific to CMU, what are the things that we think are unique and why you should potentially come here? So one, and really important, is that at CMU and the Robotics Institute, we have what we like to think is the top robotics programs in the world. So we have lots of faculty, lots of students. Here you can see 60 plus faculty, 500 plus students. The research that is done here is vast. There's so much collaboration between different departments, but also just within the institute itself, there is so much breadth between doing, as you even just here, as you've heard from us talking, with doing surgical robotics, doing aerial robotics, ground robots, doing lots of computer vision work. But also with this breadth, there's also so much depth. Each student that you talk to is essentially an expert in their own field, and there's so much to learn from. Also here at CMU, here was offered the very first PhD program in robotics. So there's a lot of really cool history there, which gives, robotics has been here for a long time. And so you can learn from that. And a lot of groundbreaking things happened here at CMU. There's a lot of strong collaboration here at CMU with industry. There are tons of organizations that we work with, tons of companies. Also within that too is a lot of government organizations, whether it be through NSF, Department of Energy, Department of Defense, DARPA, Department of Energy, all of these. There's so many different ones that you can work with these projects. And as I've said too, within other academic departments, whether it be machine learning department, mechanical engineering, and such. Other great things about CMU is the cost of living is relatively low. So here you can see a 1-bedroom apartment that is pretty close to campus, like a 10-minute walk is going to be maybe like $800 to $1,300. And obviously, if you share that with 3 other people, the rent's going to go down substantially to maybe like $500 to $800 per person. And as for food, if you're going to eat out at a restaurant that's like a $2 sign as determined by Google, that's going to be maybe like $15 to $20 per person. Another great perk about CMU is for PhD students, the insurance is free, so it's university supported, and it is really good insurance. It covers pretty much everything. It is low or no deductible for most things, and really the co-pays are really good. It covers mental health services and resources also. And also Pittsburgh has a lot of cool history and a lot of fun activities. If you go to these slides, you can go to this link and see all the great things about Pittsburgh. And here's a slide that goes into detail as far as like cost of living and how it compares to other cities. So here, if you take the PhD stipend of $38,000, if you take that, you can see how much money you would have to make in these other 4 cities to get the same standard of living. So you can see for San Francisco, it's just over about $69,000 what you have to earn. In New York, around $88,000, Seattle, $57,000, Boston, $57,000. So you can see how in Pittsburgh, the cost of living is pretty low, and housing especially is very affordable. Okay, I think I'll turn it back to Zainab for this.
Yeah, so I think this is all that we prepared for you, and we have some frequently asked questions here that we usually get. So I can actually start with the last one. How do we know which faculty are currently hiring new PhD students? So you can, if you have a specific faculty in mind that you are interested in, if you're, if the research area aligns, you can directly contact them and then ask them. So RI, for PhD students, RI actually admits to a pool. So faculty don't admit students individually. So you might not need to know actually, like who is hiring PhD students, but you can directly contact faculty to ask that question and they will answer. Sometimes they also publish or publicize if they're looking for a student, they advertise it on Twitter or in their web pages, so you can also follow them. Okay, so anyone else who wants to tackle a question here? I don't want to be.
I can answer the first question. So yeah, I think that's the question we get all the time is how much research experience in robotics should you have to pursue a PhD or research-based masters, and how many publications? I think increasingly, at least for CMU, we have accepted applicants from a wider range of backgrounds. So it's not necessarily necessary to have like at least 2 or 3 publications in top tier robotics venues. But you know, it does for sure help. Like I do think if you look around in RI, there is quite a few people that have had some experience with robotics, but it's more that you know, if you apply to the institute with some experience working with robots, it may be more convincing that you're actually interested in working with robots for 5 or 6 years. So it's more coming from that place. So you know, if you've taken a bunch of coursework and you know, or some good reason you want to work with robotics, then I think that should definitely be enough reason to try and apply. In general, I think that like if you're coming straight from undergrad, that may be more of a reason to apply to a research-based master's program if you have like no research experience at all. So that would be the last MSR program at CMU or some other schools. Yeah, does anyone else want to answer question 2 about the GRE and related to
Question 2.
Yeah.
So question 2, how important are standardized testing, GRE, TOEFL, IELTS scores? So I would say that they are important, but they are not what is going to get you denied. I think like being in the past, I've been in a lot of admissions committees, and we see it if it's a really low score, we might see it as like a red flag, but we might look into more of the application and see how it complements. So I think like it's important to have good scores, but yeah, like if you don't have a perfect GRE score, like still apply. Don't make that deter you from applying. We like in the admissions committees, we try to really look at every single aspect of the application, which gets into a little bit more of question 4, what's more important. I think like everything balances out in the end. I don't like, and every person that like, there's a lot of people that look into one application, but certain people like have different ways of looking at it. But I think like just everything in general makes an entire application, I think. And anyone else wants to add something?
Yeah, I think totally that was a great answer. I think the piece where like especially TOEFL, but also GRE is more of like a cutoff thing. Like I don't know, or I don't think that it's, you know, below a certain value will definitely not get in. But if you have a reasonable score, I don't think there's not that much emphasis on the score. So yeah, I've heard a lot of people say, you know, you need the highest score in quant for GRE or you'll definitely not get in. I don't think that's really accurate. Maybe
It also, sorry, Mark.
No, sorry, you go.
Yeah, I was going to say it also depends on the programs and schools that you are applying. So they might have different requirements, and they might also change. So year to year. So that's another piece of information. But it shouldn't. I agree to my friends. It shouldn't stop you from applying. Who is taking the third one?
Yeah, I can take the third one. So this question is, what's the FERPA or Buckley Amendment waiver? So the FERPA laws in general have to do with like privacy, student privacy, your rights to access to your information and things. And so why this is included in this frequently asked questions is you'll often see when submitting letter of recommendations or submitting the requests for a letter of recommendations, where you include like the email of who you want to set a letter of recommendation for you. There's usually a checkbox that says, do you waive like your FERPA rights or the Buckley Amendment? And what this is usually saying is that what you're agreeing to is that you didn't get to see a letter of recommendation before it's sent in, that you're not like the check in between the two. So what this is implying to the committee is that your recommender is able to say honest things about you, and they can be open and completely transparent about what they want to say. So we advise it's probably a good thing to do is to waive that, to then send that signal to the admissions committee that all the things being said are completely truthful and honest from your recommenders.
Okay. Go for it, Bart.
Yeah, I do question 4. So yeah, that's a pretty hard question. Like kind of coming back to what Sissy said. What's more important, SLP, letters of recommendation, grades, score, or research experience? I think grades and score are like as first said, it is very dependent on the department, as Zainab said. But I do think that from what I've heard, like the SLP and letters of recommendation definitely have a very strong emphasis, where you really see the motivation and core qualities of the students, whereas research experience could also be, this person just spent more time on research than the other students. But I think it's a bit of a hard question. But I also do think that at least in the RI we do look a bit more into students in a more broad way. So maybe Zainab, you can add to this.
Yeah, so I would say they all show different sides of you. So they all are important. It depends on what kind of program you are applying. So for example, for MSR or PhD program, the research experience might be more valuable compared to other things. But for MRSD, maybe an internship might be more valuable than a research experience. So like, a letter of recommendation from your previous, like internship manager might be very important. So depends on which program you're applying to, depends on which level of grad school you're applying to, it depends. But I will say like we are looking for like different piece of information from all of these parts of the application documents. And then we have another question, other opportunities besides MS PhD degrees. So I guess we have some project scientist positions or engineering positions as well in the university. We also have National Robotics Engineering Center. So there are a lot of industrial projects or collaborative projects going on there. So there are that kind of opportunities that you can work in a research project. But in terms of grad school, master's and PhD programs are the programs that you might want to consider. Any other opinions on this?
Yeah, like in our lab, we have like software developers, engineers, research associates. There are a lot of titles for things. And it is really cool how they can be alternate paths to whatever future it is you want. So there are a lot of students in our lab that were research associates before, and maybe they came in because they didn't have research experience first, or they didn't have whatever it was to get in their first try, but they came, they did work within the labs, then that gave them the experiences necessary, and then also a really strong letter of recommendation from a research advisor here at CMU that then they could leverage into an actual acceptance into a program and go on, some of them to PhDs. So there are other avenues to get where you want to go in life too.
And then there are some additional questions that are on the chat, like how is the weather in Pittsburgh at the moment? Cold. We are getting to winter, but I would say we actually have 4 seasons here, so it's very variable from season to season. So I like it though, to experience all of them. Okay, who wants to go next?
I can't see the questions. because I'm sharing a screen. Well, I guess I can see it. I can see it like this. Yeah.
Okay, so here's another question. Does CMU have placements at the end of its master programs? I assume this is for or about finding jobs after completing the master's program. Ceci,
Yeah.
I clicked that button by accident, but I guess.
That's fine.
So I don't think there's placements in my knowledge. So there's like not really like CMU has never had like anything like to rank students in terms of like GPU or performance or anything like that. But if you would like, I don't know what is the goal of this question? Like if it's like who can get into the PhD or something like that, then like as long as you have like your advisor advocate for you in like a letter of recommendation, like that sounds good. But yeah, other than that, like there's nothing like summa cum laude or like those things. Like CMU does not do rankings.
Yeah. In addition to that, we have a lot of career fairs happening in the university during the semesters, during the school year. So it is, as my experience tells me that it was very easy for most of the students to find a job after, even before actually graduation. So there are opportunities. We also have a good network here. So although we don't do placements, we actually there are resources for finding jobs.
I could take the next one.
Okay.
So I saw here, this is a really good question, I think, is it says, if we apply to the PhD program, do we also get considered for the MSR program, or are their admission processes completely independent? And so you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe as part of the application, you can just check a box that says PhD, MSR, and you just check which ones. And how the process goes is the PhD applications happen first. And if you don't make it through that process, like that will be the first pick essentially. And if you get rejected from that, then it just gets passed on to the MSR program, but they are completely independent in a way. So you get essentially two chances in that manner.
I can say about the other two questions that are sort of similar. So as far as I know, there's no real programs for international students or software engineers to enroll in. So I do know we have for undergraduate students, we do have the RISS program, so it's Robotics Institute Summer Scholars. But after undergrad, I think it's more like professor dependent. So I know in our lab, in my lab, we have even LinkedIn posts with a specific job that is opening with a specific skill set that would be required. But it could also, in some cases, help to reach out to some faculty that might be hiring more visitors or software engineers. And yeah, there's, to some extent, we do have some visitors that stay for longer periods of time. It's kind of what Brady was saying, people that stay in the lab as a researcher, sometimes from other places around the world, and work for the research project for longer periods of time.
There is another question here. Do we include fellowships we have applied to? The results for those I applied to come after the application process is complete. That's fine. I think you should. Even if you don't get them, that shows that that you are willing to apply and you are searching for them. So that also gives a piece of information about you. So I think you should. And we also know that you don't get the results within the, like before the application is done. So we are aware of that fact. Okay. What else? Here's another question. Is there a minimum GPA requirement for application? Can a good experience with research or robots compensate for a low GPA? I don't think we have a minimum GPA requirement for application. Of course, a good experience with research can compensate, but again, that depends on the committees, that depends on the professors, that depends on the research field that you are in. So there are other aspects of this question. Maybe another person can also comment on this. No? Okay. What's next?
I could talk about, there are a couple about fee waivers.
Okay.
So if you go online under CMU's webpage or SCS's, you can look specifically about those programs. And the list is extensive as far as what's included as a category to get a fee waiver. I paid many fees that afterward, after looking back, I should not have paid any. I could have gotten waived. There are things such as even clubs or honor societies. There are lots of criteria. So I would definitely recommend checking it out before you pay the money. Yeah.
Okay, so the last 5 minutes, are there other questions?
It's a question how to decide between a CS and robotics program if you're interested in autonomous vehicles or any I guess specific research interest. I think I would recommend looking into faculty specifically. If you're really interested in research, then and that does work, like, and you're interested in a faculty that's at a specific university, it's probably best to apply to whatever department that they could recommendation there or have similar purpose. So and then maybe they can admit students from multiple departments. In that case, it's typically the main difference is course requirements. So some people here, for instance, are good in machine learning and robotics, but the students have different course requirements, and their program looks a little different. So you could look into that if you're still not sure. I'll probably see people have some more information on this, but that's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay, there is an interesting question. Is there a possibility for long-term research internships for international students, and are there official programs, or is it lab professor dependent? I'm not sure if I understood this, but depends on your visa, and most student visas actually come with OPTs, so that's optional practical training, and you can do internships with them, as far as I know. So Bart and Ceci, I believe you came with visa, so probably you know more about this.
Yeah, so I think like if
Ceci,
you're sure. So if you are a student and you come into with an F1, it is really easy to like as you are doing your school to like get in touch with a professor and ask about a research internship. I believe there's also the J1 for a lot of internationals, and that allows you to also do some research. I have a lot of friends that came into like my lab as a J1, and they were just staff for about a year or two before becoming students. So yeah, I think like it depends a lot on like if the professors are hiring, and yeah, if you have like the possibility of having like the J1 or F1. I don't know if you know of anything else, Bart.
No, I think it's accurate. Yeah, I haven't really heard people not take research internships because of visa issues. I think that typically this works out.
Okay. I think we are at the end of our webinar. So thank you all for attending. And if you have other questions we couldn't answer because of the time, or additional questions that comes up later, you can either contact the school, you can go to frequently asked question pages at RI and SCS. And I hope this was helpful for all of you.